Welcome to the Order.
Not what I was expecting.
That's the idea.
We're a small handful of freedom fighters. We are the last and only line of defense. We've accumulated vast intelligence on the demons and their collaborators. World leaders, bankers, pop stars. We can hit them where it hurts.
Amazing. Dante, it really is you.
Hi gamers, and welcome to my head-to-head of Devil May Cry Definitive Edition on the Xbox One and PS4. As I covered a pretty detailed analysis and short review of the game at the weekend with my first contact on the PS4, I will leave the story and detail below if you need to catch up on that and the difference from last gen to now. Please check it out if you have the time or are interested. Brief summary is, this is the chance for Ninja Theory with the help of Kulok, who did the conversion from their own original DX11 PC version in the first place over to the Xbox One and PS4 updates we have here. With the team being a Poland-based company specialising in port conversion, QA and localisation, this was a cost process most likely paid for by Capcom and overseen by Ninja Theory, who are hard at work on their next game, Hellblade. But having made the original PC version, it was a sound bet to managing the port to now-gen machines. So how well have they done at their first attempt on Microsoft and Sony's latest consoles? Well, we can tick off that both consoles achieve the hallowed 1080 60 FPS target. That instantly means this game is simply one of the best games of the generation, if you base your enjoyment on these two sets of numbers. But there are changes we need to worry about. Well, from the last gen and PC, the game itself now sports the DLC, updated FMV video sequences that are now rendered in 60 FPS rather than 30. Extra skins to play as Dante from DmC 1 or Neo Dark Dante, and more refined attacks, lock-on mode instated by demand, and a new set of modes above the last gen, Dante Must Die. That gives Hell Trigger to enemies, meaning one-hit deaths. Topped up by a turbo mode that offers up to a 20% speed boost on the frantic game. It will really test your reaction speeds and skill. But is the experience shared across the Xbox One and PS4? Well, as I say, the target refresh rate is the same for both at 60, and with a jump up from 720 last gen to 1080 now, the entire game looks a lot crisper and cleaner. But this also shows up how the last gen quality textures in the game. These are worse on random less important sections like roads, screens or rubbish bins, which highlight its roots even more now the higher resolution is present. But this is welcome over the last gen blurry screens in place. Just a shame assets could not have had some love shared on them, but it makes sense with a cost-effective port aimed at the gameplay improvements. Story gets a tweak with some edits in the game, the loss of Virgil's hat and cane now replaced with a samurai sword, and a new ending. But the blurry side from last gen is not completely removed. As I mentioned in my PS4 version, AF is suspicious by its absence on Sony's machine, and not for the first time, especially with an Unreal 3 engine game. This is the process that is used to filter the textures at oblique angles to the camera, so that the detail is not lost as it rolls into the horizon. But on PS4 this is not present, and leaves the textures looking squashed, flat and muddy, with some scenes looking very bad with the blurry looking ground on cobbled areas or long runs, which does a lot to ruin the increasing clarity from the resolution and temporal improvements from the 60 FPS rate. But on the Xbox One, the textures are treated to what looks like a full 8 times or even 16 times anisotropic filtering on the bitmaps as they run into the distance. This clearly makes the Xbox One version more pleasing on the eye. See here on the cobbled streets how only feet away from Dante on PS4, the ground looks blurred and just gets worse as you look further into the screen. In comparison, the Xbox One version keeps that detail at the angle intact. This covers pretty much everywhere in the game that looks better or worse in certain areas, like the floor here. With it being such a stark difference, it really can be noticed throughout the game, no matter if you play them side by side or not. This is made worse even greater still by the actual AA solution used on the PS4 being far harsher and blurring the screen and textures even more, no matter if oblique or not, which just makes the whole image look even more cloudy and muddy. Why this has happened here is a mystery. From my last video I guessed this would be the case, and my assumption was based on the PS4's lower level API GNMX that is designed to mimic the DX paths much easier so that less work is needed from a port from PC. But this could bring issues of its own, with its engine showing issues before on the PS4. Now the direct causes or reasons for this are all guesswork unless a developer can give an answer on this, which I'm currently trying to find out for myself. It could be, as I surmise, that the higher level API has overhead or conflicts with certain engines like Unreal 3. With the Q-Lock being a PC dev first and foremost, this adds even more weight to my theory that they have used the GNMX API here, with the X1 being fully DX11 compliant with additional benefits available within its SDK that may have helped the team get a much quicker result from the Xbox One than the PS4. That is not to say that the X1 is benefiting much more outside of the simple and more familiar codebase. I suspect this was a very short and cheap outsourced job to do to a company that has long links with Capcom, with certain changes possibly needed on the PS4 port not done, missed, or a simple cost, time or knowledge issue. Cache coherency could also be a factor with how this is handled within the API, and being a large factor with AF along with bandwidth usage and the PSSL language handling this or defaulting AF off or trilinear as a failsafe. Again, many people think AF is free and it very much is not, with modern games now having a much larger texture size with 1024 by 1024 being commonplace. This will indeed limit how high and far AF will go, and resources have to be managed appropriately on a case by case basis. But here with DmC this does not really factor in, with the bandwidth structure of the PS4 being more than capable of achieving the level of X1's 8 or maybe even 16 times AF without a sweat. So the issue is not a direct hardware one but a software one. My theory still stands, but as of now we still do not know. But as soon as I do, I will make sure you are the second to. But does this much cleaner texture quality come at a cost on the Xbox One? The answer is no, not really. Most likely the full 1080 display is the reason we have a difference on performance, but this is minor. As you saw from my earlier PS4 video, it holds a pretty solid 60 FPS most of the time, with streaming being an issue sometimes as you move through the levels, and even the video files on PS4 stuttering as they kick in sometimes, even tearing, which the X1 version seemingly seems to avoid. But the X1 does tear a lot to try and keep its frame rate in line when it starts rendering heavy alpha effects on screen. With it running an adaptive sync, this means that it rarely drops a frame like the PS4 does, very occasionally, but instead lets the buffer go whether it's finished or not. This can leave the X1 having long sections of tearing that many will know is not my favourite thing, and this leaves the screen looking wobbly at times, with the PS4 only tearing very infrequently, so as you never really notice it outside of the analysis I do here on each displayed frame. This means that to try and maintain the frame, the X1 can feel a little loose and not as solid as the PS4 version, but this is by no means a large or even medium issue, just that the PS4 offers up the slightly more consistent performance. With the occasional times the screen is filled with enemies on X1, it can tear itself up for a few seconds, which you can see here as I slow it down. But overall they both stick close enough to the 60 FPS target for it not to be an issue, and the tearing on X1 is only minor but can be noticed at times. But the lack of AF is noticeable in many places on the PS4, and it is a shame as it does, as I said, ruin a lot of the work on the port by lowering the texture quality as much as it does. Let's hope this is an issue that can be addressed, or maybe even fixed. Outside of this, the game has some weird lighting glitches at times, with characters having lights flick on and off within scenes, or being bathed in a colour with no discernible source. Also, shadows can react oddly at points moving orientation with no rhyme nor reason, but overall the shadows, effects, lighting and textures are all identical across both, aside the AF issue. The versions are pretty much identical on both, with the X1 having the better picture quality due to the AF issue, just performing ever so slightly worse with tearing that the PS4 never really suffers from to any noticeable degree. I will leave you with a few more minutes of FPS comparison on both, just so you can get a feel for the game. But overall it's a very consistent and impressive performance on what would have been a very quick and fast release to get out in time for some sales. As always, I hope you guys and girls enjoyed this. If you did, then please hit that like button and that subscribe button. I appreciate each and every one of you that does. You guys enjoy yourself, play hard, and I'll see you soon on the next one.
You feel it now, don't ya?